Hey everyone, I'm Caitlin and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be going over the different kinds of readers, either those who prefer plot, themes, or characters, and then give you guys some recommendations on either authors or books you should check out depending on which category you're in. Personally, both my husband and I prefer character stories over plot stories or theme stories, so I do have a little bit of a bias and I have a lot more recommendations for character stories, but I did find some examples for each of these categories, so there will be recommendations for all of them. And just a big disclaimer that even though I label these as character stories, plot stories, or theme stories, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are lacking in the other categories. It just is kind of my opinion as to what their main focus is. And you might disagree with me on this, and you might think that a book that I recommend for themes is more character driven than theme driven. Either way, this is just kind of the list I came up with, and a good jumping off point, especially if you're not confident with what kind of books you're into and what you go towards. Without further ado, let's jump right on into what a theme-based story is. I like to think of these as the end of an Animaniacs episode with the wheel of morality, turn, 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 tell us a lesson that we should learn. These stories tend to focus on a central idea, a question, or an emotion that the author kind of works through the characters. A good example of this is John Green, who tends to center all of his stories around a big idea or question or thought or emotion. I go straight to Turtles All the Way Down, where John Green specifically wanted to get into OCD and kind of what a day-to-day life looks like for that and how you navigate relationships within that, especially when you're dealing with a kind of traumatic incident. And while I didn't really like Turtles All the Way Down, I have my own reasonings for that, but a lot of that has to do with I am a very character-based reader, and this is a theme-based book. Another really great theme-based author is Stephen King. A lot of his stories, although they are horror, tend to all revolve around certain questions, aspects, or life experiences or feelings. A great example of this is Pet Sematary, which focuses on grief and what it means to lose a child. This is the main reason that this book was written. And while it has amazing characters and amazing relationships, the point of the book is to dissect grief from a parent's point of view, and it does a beautiful job of that. That being said, horror is not everyone's shtick, so I totally understand that. Another author I would recommend that is in the adult genre would be Jodi Picoult. A lot of her books do focus around a singular event that she wants to look into, a theme, emotions, anything like that. So, for example, we have My Sister's Keeper, which is all about a girl who wants to get bodily autonomy from her parents to thus not give her kidney to her sister who is dying of cancer. It's very much about family dynamics, and it goes into this courtroom drama-esque world to kind of look deeper into that and what it means to grow up in a family with a sister or sibling in general who is sick. And it goes into excruciating detail about it, and by the end you feel their pain, you feel the suffering that all of them have gone through in their whole lives and what everyone is thinking and why they're thinking that. It's very good. So at the end of the day, theme is all about exploring certain emotions and human experiences. So if you're someone who goes into a book and says, I want to learn something about myself and others, you're probably a theme-based reader. So let's go right into what a plot-based reader is. Plot-based readers seem kind of like an obvious thing. I mean, of course you're going to be reading a book because you want to see what happens, because you care about the story itself, but it's actually a little bit deeper than that. Plot-based readers tend to care more about world building. What is the society like? What is happening and why is it happening, than they do about the characters in that story or the overarching theme. And again, I'll say that these kinds of readers do care about characters and theme. It's just not the main reason they're reading the book. And that's totally fine. Plot-based readers tend to go towards thrillers, mysteries, because it really is the experience of the story being told that is interesting to them, not who is in the story or what the point of the story is. I think that these readers tend to be very direct, and I totally respect that, because honestly, if a plot's not good, it doesn't matter if it's character-based story or if it's a theme-based story, the whole book's not gonna be that great. So in a way, that these kinds of readers are very fundamentalist. So let me give you some examples of some plot-based authors, and again, it doesn't mean their characters or their themes are bad, it's just kind of the way they go. Oh, I caught that on camera. That's not great. So for the fantasy genre, because I am a fantasy nerd, I will start off there with Brandon Sanderson. Specifically, I want to talk about Mistborn because Mistborn is an amazing world with complex magic systems and a very well-defined society and a plot that is kind of hammered in very early on. The Dark One is still in control and you're trying to take him down with this band of misfits. Again, I'm not saying the characters are bad in this. I actually really love a lot of these characters, but I think the heart of Mistborn lies in its story and trying to figure out what's happening. A really good example of this is the fact that it has little intros before each of the chapters that kind of give you a little more glimpse into the world and how it came to this point. And by the end of Hero of Ages, there's just a culmination of all of these plot points and developments that have been happening that give you such a satisfying ending. And I think really satisfying endings are the best thing you could hope for a plot-based reader. You want all of those little threads to come together and tie into a neat little bow. And I think that's great. Honestly, I feel those satisfying feelings when I'm done with a book, and that is what makes the experience. Now going on to a YA fantasy series, Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, which is all about a heist that is happening with this band of criminals, similar to Mistborn, but this one's a little bit morally gray, whereas Mistborn, everyone really is good at heart. Not so much in Six of Crows. The whole time you're reading this book, you're wondering how they're gonna pull it off, what is Kaz thinking, how are they going to get over this obstacle, what's happening now, oh no, something's going wrong. And it really is just a wild ride that they take you on. And again, you get more glimpses into this world that you didn't get in the Shadow and Bone trilogy, so it really does dive deeper into that. And just in general, the whole book is so good for its plot. I followed along so avidly because of it. And even though I love these characters, they're very well developed and have great relationships with one another. I don't think this book would have been good if it didn't have the plot that it did. And it really, at the end of the day, is all about breaking these characters out of prison and going and finding this person for a maybe evil, corrupt corporate entity. And it's very good for those reasons, first and foremost. And to round it off with a non-fantasy read, I'm going to suggest anything by Michael Crichton. Michael Crichton does an amazing job of having you learn something and to have you go on this journey where something very complex and convoluted is happening and you're trying to figure out how to either stop it, get around it, or how it happened in the first place. For example, Jurassic Park. I'm sure you guys all know the movie franchise, and I know you know that the characters are not the shining star of that, minus maybe Ian Malcolm, but let's be honest, that has everything to do with the performance and not necessarily the character as itself. Either way, Jurassic Park is so interesting because you have genetically engineered dinosaurs roaming around this random island in the middle of the Pacific, and it's so cool, and there's tons of things happening in the world, and you want to know how these characters are going to get themselves out of it. What's happening? What did this happen in the first place? And eventually the whole thing gets napalmed, and it's great. Sorry if that's a spoiler, but it's been around for a really long time. If you don't know what happens at the end of Jurassic Park, you need to get with the program. Society has moved on without you. All right, so let's hop into the category that I am a part of, and that is character-based readers. These kinds of books really do focus on exploring certain characters, their relationships to others, and how that informs how they act within the world. A lot of the times the romance genre will fit within this, although not exclusively. So if you have a really good romance like, for example, ACOTAR, which their plot is kind of lacking, but the romance and the characters is very well explored, then that's a kind of example of a character-based book. Character-based readers tend to like first person, but not always, because it does allow them to kind of go right into the mind of the person that they're following, and this ends up opening the world and how they see it in a lot more detail. They also tend to care a lot about character arcs. Think Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender. He's likely to be the favorite of someone who is a character-based reader because the arc is satisfying, not necessarily the end to the series as a whole, but where Zuko ends up is more important. I don't know if that makes sense, but that's kind of where character-based readers diverge from plot-based readers. is because they care about the character arc, not the plot arc. These readers are often put off by books that end up having bad main characters that they feel like they can't relate to or can't follow. For example, I personally really didn't like Furyborn because I didn't like one of the main characters, and it ended up spoiling the series for me even though I thought the plot and the magic system was interesting. Alright, so I already recommended Sarah J. Maas for character-based readers because she does do a great job of getting into the minds of people, their decisions, and their relationships. But for adult fantasy readers out there, I do have a recommendation, which is Lies of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. This book doesn't have that much happen in it. Well, it does towards the end, but like it doesn't have a really strict, streamlined plot because you're really focusing on these characters and these thieving crews that are going to be in the middle of this big city. It has a lot of world building, but the point is to follow Locke and his friend Jean, and it has one of the best friendships in any adult fantasy book. So again, it's really focusing on how they get out of their scrapes, their arcs, and what happens throughout the series. For anyone who doesn't know, Lies of Locke Lamora follows Locke Lamora and his band of a thieving crew as they try and pull off some heists, and they also are trying to kind of deal with some gang politics that are happening throughout the book. And finally, for my people who do not read fantasy, Station 11 is a great example of a character-based book. You're following multiple different people, both pre and post-pandemic. I have a full review and I'll link it in the description, but this is another one that has just so much potential for the characters, and the plot is really just about following these people and what they have done after this great devastation happens. Anyways, that's it, guys. I'm really curious, and please leave a comment below. What kind of reader are you? Do you care mostly about the themes, the plot, or the characters themselves? Alrighty, I am off to Barnes & Noble to buy a billion more books that are character-based. Until next time, have a good one, guys.